A hardcore rule set is a good thing, actually. In this video, I'm going to discuss my 4 main reasons why I really enjoy playing the hardcore mode in video games. And at the end, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about what difficulty means as well. So first and foremost, hardcore is just a different way to play. By having something as small as permadeath, you are fundamentally going to approach the game differently. And that's a good thing. It can give you a deeper appreciation or, as a player, explore systems that you never thought you would end up exploring. Recently, I've been playing World of Warcraft's hardcore classic mode, and for the first time in my life, I found myself leveling the first aid skill, something that I had never touched or come close to engaging with previously. But honestly, it just gives you that appreciation for all of the little details and all the little wins that you get while you're playing. And that leads into my next point, that this is ultimately just an expression of skill. The ultimate expression of skill for the game that you're playing. It's kind of this proof of mastery in a way where you feel really accomplished that you have beat the game in what is known as the hardest way to do it. I mean, I know I'm guilty of having a really inflated head when I beat honor mode in Baldur's Gate for the first time. And that badge of honor pairs really well with the next point, which is that it actually makes the players feel something. I find that especially with RPGs, for the most part, you are kind of just going through the motions if you are not given an incentive to feel things deeper. But how does hardcore make you feel? Well, it gives you 2 major feelings. Major accomplishment and major loss. That accomplishment piece comes with every step that you're taking, really. Sure, in RPGs, you always feel good after beating that boss or exploring that area. But in hardcore, it kind of just hits different. It's this weird sense of exhilaration, right? Like when you're playing Celeste and going for a golden flag and you finally manage to do that level perfectly and you get your golden flag. It's this sense of exhilaration and accomplishment that you have just done the hard thing. But there's also that exhilaration that comes when the going is close, when you just squeak out that kill when you're left with 5% health remaining, or if you're on that last point of health when you finally take down the boss. That feeling of exhilaration knowing that you were this close to losing it all, and then overcoming that just compounds that feeling of good. But where there is good, there is also very bad. I felt pretty bad when I lost my level 27 warrior to a mob that just happened to be able to full heal. But what's funny is, with both these positive and negative emotions, a community forms around the hardest mode of these games. Let's be honest, there's entire subreddits dedicated to how to play the hardest mode available for a lot of these games. And they're all brought together by the collective trauma of having all of this progress or all of these feelings come out. But I think what's the most important is that these hardcore modes remain optional. I don't think it benefits the player or the developer if we're forcing little Timmy to go and play hardcore. But there's also a discussion to be had about, is that the experience you want the player to be having? There is a huge difference between Mario Wonder and Elden Ring, but those are all games that have fixed difficulty. Hell, let's be honest, we've all been there. We've all played a game where the first decision you have to make is how hard do you want the game to be? You honestly don't even know what you're signing up for the most part. And let's be honest, difficulty in video games is kind of weird. For the most part, the higher the difficulty you go, it usually just means the more hits and more times you need to bonk the enemy on the head before they're actually going to fall over. I'll use Fire Emblem Heroes as this next example, because in Fire Emblem Heroes, there's 2 difficulty sliders. There's the intelligence of the enemy units, and then there is how punishing things are for you. So if you wanted to play the hardest game that you could in Fire Emblem, you would be doing the maddening classic mode. Maddening because all of the enemy units are supposed to be smart, and classic because back in the day, Fire Emblem made it so that anytime one of your units died, they would be permanently out for the rest of the run. And that classic feature is honestly the reason that my sisters couldn't get into Fire Emblem for a really long time. They liked the story of Fire Emblem, and it made it inaccessible if they had to go and min-max their way to walk through each of those levels. But if hardcore is optional, how are we even supposed to begin approaching designing difficulty in games? How can we differentiate between an experience like Dark Souls where you're designed to lose and learn versus the self-made challenge of a Nuzlocke in Pokemon? And this is where we go into my opinion, and you can let me know yours in the comments. But I prefer games that have one fixed difficulty, because let's be honest, that means I feel like I'm playing the game in the way the developer intended. I don't have to worry about running into situations where I'm just pumping bullets into a damage sponge. And I mean, to be blunt, most players, myself included, certainly are not going to be playing games multiple times just to experience the game at a higher difficulty. A game really has to latch into me for me to go through and do that. I just finished playing Mario and Luigi Brothership, and if they would have had a higher difficulty, I don't think I would have have used it, and I certainly am not motivated to go back and re-experience that same game on a higher difficulty. So where's the line? I think ultimately the hardcore difficulty should be a reward for players that are the most obsessed with your game. I think that the first playthrough should be around that one balanced point that you see. But then after that, for any player who fell in love or maybe wants to go again and have that extra challenge, hardcore should then unlock. Because there's also something to be said about how frustrating it would be to play hardcore your first time through. I think those kind of games where you're losing all your progress and that's how you have to progress through the game is known as a rage game, right? Like when you think of getting over it and you reset your progress every time you make a mistake and then you have to re-progress, that in itself is hardcore difficulty and is a rage game. But if players have the entire first playthrough to go through, learn the mechanics, and then come back in, now ready and knowing what to expect in hardcore, that seems like the best experience, and that is the experience that Baldur's Gate 3 went for. Now, granted, they did add Honor Mode as DLC, and I do think Baldur's Gate 3 is a gold standard for how you want to approach difficulty, so let me go into that a little bit more. Baldur's Gate 3 has 4 main difficulty modes, but the one that they clearly meant for players to at least start with is called Balanced. But if you're new to the genre or just want to experience more of the story, then you can go into Explorer. But what Baldur's Gate does with Explorer is they are not giving the enemies less power. They're giving the player more power. Because in Explorer, you just have more resources to work with. Specifically, you have twice as much health, and your ability to get back all of your spells and everything that you use to progress through the world is greatly increased. This means that you still feel like you're accomplishing and taking down enemies that have a brain up there. They're not just meat potatoes. But the game is giving you more to work with. That gives the player a better sense of progression. And that sense of progression continues as you get harder and do the harder difficulties in the game as well, culminating in Honor Mode, where on top of having the permadeath, you also have a whole bunch of creatures in the entire game that have special actions and abilities that only take place inside of Honor Mode. These legendary actions let you go through and re-experience the game under a new lens, because now you have to go and use all of the systems that you already are familiar with and then apply them to new situations, despite the fact that it's the exact same encounters that you've already done. Ultimately, I made this video just to talk about difficulty and why difficulty is so difficult to design for. The biggest thing that I want to re-emphasize is that difficulty should not just mean bigger health bars. There needs to be something else going on there, otherwise you're going to run into the meat potato problem. So what is your favorite game to play on the hardest difficulty, and why? What does it do that makes you feel that way? Let me know in the comment section down below. Happy gaming, I'll see you soon.